Good afternoon. Welcome to Chamber Live, how to develop habits for long-term resilience. The views expressed in this seminar don't necessarily represent the views of the East Lancs Chamber of Commerce, although they probably do. And all facts were believed to be correct at the time of recording, which is the 4th of May, 2020. I'm going to very quickly introduce our speaker for today. Regulars at the Chamber will probably know Heather. She's been a familiar face in our training for many years. She's a habit change specialist. She's studied the brain and human behaviour for over 20 years and now helps companies and individuals to free themselves from old habits and become their best authentic selves. She runs masterclasses, she speaks at conferences, she's a great MC. Her energy levels and wit have gained her many admirers and followers, and her personal brand is quite simply her uniqueness. She's known for a no-nonsense approach in getting to the heart of everything that she does. And if you don't like today's webinar, please just remember she's got 3 black belts in 4 different martial arts and she pulls no punches. You'll find her charismatic and inspiring. Let me hand over then to today's Chamber Live speaker, Heather Wright.
Hello, everyone. It's really good to be here. Thanks very much for the intro. It's always difficult just knowing that people can see your face while somebody says stuff about you and you kind of want to go, oh no, it's like having your mother in the room going, go on, say something funny. It's brilliant. She's lovely, my daughter. She can dance and everything. Anyway, but welcome. It's really nice. So today the subject is resilience. I'm going to be doing a few things to hopefully make it a little bit interactive. So if you're one of those people who likes to tick off and have it playing in the background, that would be a shame. So I'd really like to have you on board. So I'm just, oh, okay, that's an interesting one. I'll stop that share. Technically, you think these things are going to go really well and then something beggars it up. So give me one moment. I was just sharing my screen and I thought that might be, I'll go with that one. I'll go with that one and we'll see how that does. Okay, and we'll go into presentation mode. We will, there we go. And so I hope you can all see that. It's always really nice if you help me out, because you can never quite tell whether or not you're sharing screens, whether or not it's working or not. So if things aren't working, please write something in the chat. If the volume goes or there's a technical issue, it's really good to let me know and I will do my best. Luckily, Simon's there on hand to help. So yeah, this is me. This is what, see, that's, I just need to check that that's all, is that all sharing with you when I'm sharing my screen?
Yes, it was doing, yeah.
Okay, you see, you know what happens? You know when you try to get a little bit too technical? Yesterday, I decided to set up a second screen and I don't know which one you're seeing. So it confuses me very much, just confuses me a little bit. So I've got the technology right. It's just the human being hasn't caught up with it yet. So let me do that again. So hopefully you'll be able to see this again. Okay, so this is me when I can actually get a haircut. I don't know if the haircuts have been difficult for everybody, but by gum, it can be an issue, can't it? As he quite rightly said, I do lots of different things, a bit of cycling, a bit of, but bungee jumping and things like this. But the thing that I'm most excited about at the moment, it's my birthday this week, and my birthday present from my husband was a second hive of bees. So I've now got 2 hives of bees and they are in the garden, really enjoying themselves. So I'm really chuffed about that. I'm just going to go to presentation mode so that you can see this next slide. It's not going to let me, which is fair enough. I've done work with lots of different organizations over the 20 years. So, my subject is behavioral change, is habit change, if you like. And that was what Simon was saying. And you may wonder why we're talking about habit change when resilience is the subject, how to become more resilient. And the reason we talk about that is because actually resilience is about developing habits, and it's about developing the right kind of habits. So you can either, People talk about whether or not you're born with it or not. I don't know whether anyone's necessarily born more resilient, but certainly some people develop habits quite early, and they might develop those habits because of the way their parents are, or they might develop those habits because of something they've come into contact with. If they've developed it because of the way their parents were or the routine they were in, then they may not have even noticed they've done it. Whereas sometimes we develop them consciously. And what I want to talk about today is how to develop them consciously. Okay, so I have a couple of questions for you, first of all, and that would be, so, oh, I've got a little thing. I want to see if you can do this with me. I'm going to share this one. Here we go. We've gone to that one. Hey, there we go. Done that one. Moving on. Can everybody see a map? Simon, can you see a map? I know you can unmute yourself much more easily.
Yeah, I can see the map.
Brilliant. Okay, if you go to the top of your screen, if you're on a laptop, if you're on a phone, it's slightly different, or a tablet, slightly different. But find the box that says annotate. Okay, annotate. Click on annotate, and you should be able to put a little cross where you are. It would be really nice to kind of know. I'm presuming we've not got anybody joining us from New York today, so I've just done one that's a little bit more local. I did this the other day, and I was speaking to a group from Tennessee and Virginia, and I put the wrong map up, and I went, click where you are, and none of them could. So if you can find the annotate box, click on annotate, and that will give you the ability to put some crosses in. Great, I can see those. All right, so we've got some in the filed there, a couple in Burnley, got a little blue one there, a little blue box, little, yeah, you can put arrows in as well. The other day I had someone putting an arrow randomly in the middle of the sea. I had a look at them on the, they didn't look like they were swimming. Oh, somebody's over there near Chester. Oh, you're right on the edge there of Chester-ish way, Cheshire. Always nice to see. What have we got? We've got one, someone's put one there just on the edge of Lancashire. I gave you two maps in case we were going a little bit more broad. Quite a few in the filed. Blackburn, quite a few in Blackburn, couple over there in Clitheroe. I don't know if you've ever done annotate before, but it's quite a fun thing to be able to do. Somebody asking something in chat. Let's have a quick look at that. Can't find the annotate button. You're in Heysham near Lancashire, and that's fine. And that's the option. If you don't get a chance to put the annotate box on, at least you can type it in the chat. So nice to have you join us from up there in Heysham. Hope it's all nice and sunny up there as well. The sun is out here, certainly. Gloucester. Well, I'm afraid I didn't manage to get Gloucester on the map, but it is welcome from Gloucester. I hope you can understand the accent, you know, the language from up there. Haslingden, fantastic. You've got presenter mode. Well, you can have presenter mode provided it's showing me. I'm the one with the bright pink glasses. That's okay. I don't know if you can see the slides at all then if you're in presentation. Accrington, Burnley, Padiham. Padiham down, right down on the south coast, or is there another Padiham? Amber, maybe she'll tell me in a minute. That's brilliant. Okay, cool. So that was that slide. I'll just come out of that. There we go. I'm just going to clear all those drawings. Don't let me, you know, don't think I'm being rude. Here's a question. What advice have you already heard about resilience? Just really quickly so I know what you've been doing. So I'm going to launch a poll now. And the poll is asking what you are currently doing at this point. Okay, what are you doing at this point with regard to, that's funny, there we go. Yeah, with regard to resilience. So there's a choice of about 10 things. Have you launched that for me, Simon? Did you click on that? It suddenly went out.
It's launched now, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hey, if you've got a green mug, it's quite funny what it looks like you're putting in your mouth there. So yeah, so people can answer. So there's quite a few things people suggest about resilience. It's a little bit of a different subject with regard to what I'm going to talk about in just a moment, but I wanted to know what you were already doing. Ah, Lizzie's found it now. Excellent. Yorkshire Dales. Nice to have you over there from Yorkshire. Grand. Buckshore Village. Brilliant. Okay.
We're there's 6 people that yet to vote, so we'll give them 4 seconds and then we'll cut it off.
4 seconds. You got to move fast. Got to move fast. 4 seconds to click quickly. Lizzie's out in her garden there. Are you in the park or at the garden? That's fantastic. But I noticed you've had to wear a bit of a woolly. It wasn't quite as warm as you thought it was. Yeah, fair enough. Somebody once said to me, everywhere's warm enough so long as you've got the right clothing. It's like everywhere's in walkable distance provided you've got time, kind of thing. Okay, so we're sharing those results. Thanks for that, Simon. So 4 of you are doing a bit of meditation. 6 of you are doing a bit of yoga. 27 are doing walks every day. I mean, my question is, how many of you used to walk before this? And now you're out there. I discovered a road, a little Ginnelly road behind, well, not quite behind my house, but round the back somewhere yesterday. And I just decided, stuff it, I'll go down this and see where it goes. And ended up going, and then me and my husband was going, I better know where this comes out. And we were laying bets on where it came out. So you start to learn the area a little bit more when you're not in your car, don't you? It's great. So it's brilliant. Although I always find that awkward when you're coming across somebody and you're on a path and it's a question of who's gonna cross the road and make the other person feel like they smell. How does that work? Anyway, so we've got that. We've got watching positive videos. Quite a few of you are doing that. That's good. TED Talks are cracking at a time like this. Or if you're watching masterclasses, if anyone's downloaded the masterclasses, there's some great stuff there. Or masterclasses, depending on where you come from. Talking over worries with a friend. Okay, about 11 of you are doing that, which is great, provided you pick the right friend. You know what I mean? Because some people just make it worse, don't they? Oh, I know, isn't it terrible? And you just come away feeling awful. Avoiding social media. Only 6 of you avoiding social media. Well, I guess it depends on whether you spent much time on it before. But I don't know about you. I am up to my eyeballs with WhatsApp groups that ping with people talking about stuff. My next door neighbors group at the moment, or this neighborhood group, had a massively long conversation after where can we get some lemons about next door's dog. So, you know, times you don't need all of that. Not watching the news is good. Hey, look, nobody has said you're doing nothing and you're really stressed. So that's good. But we have got a couple of people saying nothing and you're not stressed. Great, let's stop sharing those results. Because I think that's really, really important when we talk about that. So what I want to do is I want to differentiate between what we do when we're feeling stressed and what we do to prevent feeling stressed, okay? What we do to prevent feeling stressed. So we've talked about what advice we've already heard. So there's different areas, okay? There's different areas of resilience. So yoga, meditation, going for walks, those are the sorts of things that we tend to do. We should put them into our daily habits to keep us calm. But there are also things we do if we're feeling a little bit anxious. What I want to talk, because there's loads and loads of that advice, and I would recommend you take that advice. I think it's a really good thing to be able to do. Even if meditation wasn't your thing before, and it certainly wasn't mine. I'm so flighty. Somebody once said to me, Heather, if you can manage 30 seconds, it'll be brilliant. You know, because I'm like, what was that? What was that? What was that? I've got an email to send. Oh, I've got a lot better at it, got a bit calmer, okay? But what I want to talk about is how we develop habits that will help build that mental toughness, okay? So these are the sorts of things I think we really need to know, okay? I think we need to know what drives behaviors. What is it that's driving the behavior that we want, and what is it that's driving the behavior we don't want? Because actually, anxiety and stress, in many ways, as much as they're emotions, they're also behaviors. But you'll understand that as we do more on the brain, okay? How our beliefs drive our emotions. It's really important to think about how our beliefs drive our emotions, because the British Medical Dictionary's definition of stress, when I was studying psychology many years ago, said this: when our perceived demands outweigh our perceived ability to cope. Yeah, when our perceived demands outweigh our perceived ability to cope. That's the British Medical Dictionary. Now, I expected it to say when this chemical gets with this chemical. But the word perceived was in there twice, which says if we change what we believe or how we perceive something, we may very well be able to change whether or not something makes us more stressed. And even if right now this situation isn't making you stressed, there may be something that you can put into place. And if you're a leader of people, then it's important, even if you don't get stressed about stuff, to understand why other people get stressed, because it might be your job to help them through it and help them to be able to develop habits. If you think about it with your teams, if you ever want a behavior to change, it's a habit you want to develop. It's all about habit change, okay? So we need to know how our brain creates habits, and we're going to talk about that. And we need to know how to change that in habits, okay? So here's a question for you. What do you do if you want to change? If you have a habit or a behavior you want to change, I'm asking the question, do you have a process? So we're going to do this by sign language or by typing something in the chat box. So by sign language, this means I absolutely, if I have a habit I want to change, or anything I want to change, I have a process. Step 1, I do this. Step 2, I do this. Step 3, I do this. An absolute process. That's the sign. If you absolutely have no idea, you kind of went, no, I just muscle through and pray. That's that. Okay. If you kind of do some stuff, but you don't do the same stuff all the time, we'll go for a bit of that, which either means you need a drink, even though it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or you kind of wishy-washy about it. So what do? Do you have a process? Do you not have a process? Do you sometimes do a bit? I just like watching to see if you can find the emoticons. Those of you don't, yeah, this just means you all need a drink. It's lockdown. I've been drinking every night. What's wrong with you, Heather? After when the sun's out, I have a rosé in the garden. Absolutely. Okay, so what I can see from that is half and half. Is that an order? Was that an order for a drink? It'll have an half and half. Thanks very much. Thanks, Tim. Okay, so what we're saying here is a lot of us sort of leave it to chance. Some people, yes, you have a process. Next question then, and it was dangerous saying you did. I'd like to know what that process is without you explaining it massively long. So find your chat box and just type in a bullet point about what your process might be, so that those who don't have a process might be able to learn from that. Because let's face it, I'm not the only one who's got advice here. There's loads of us. We've all got good advice. Okay, we're all human. According to Rag and Bone Man, we're human after all. I was going to give you a song, but I've decided not to. It's only Monday afternoon. Don't want to scare the birds. So processes are really, really important. Once you realize you've got a habit that you want to change or a habit you want to develop, it's really important. But it may be the same as a leader with your people, your teams. How do you want them to change? I've not got anything in the chat box yet, so I'm wondering if you just want to keep it to yourself. Is your habit change, oh, here we go, on a good day, what are the initiators of bad habits, and how do you interrupt me, or how do you interrupt the habits? If you're on a laptop, I think you can press the space bar if you want to interrupt me. Preventing stress, change process, think ahead. Okay, what is wanted, how you might look, and gradually get to, okay, so some of you are going for, let's find the vision of what we want, look ahead, see what that looks like, and then gradually change and move towards it in small steps. Okay, Paul says he talks to someone, a problem shared is a problem halved. It can be, it depends on who you share it with, of course. You know, how do I interrupt my habit? Oh, okay, not just how do I interrupt you, because this idea of being able to mute people, it's great if you're the host. It's brilliant. I'm a bit worried about after lockdown, I'm just going to go up and bash people in the head and go, mute, mute. And they're going to keep talking. It's wrong. I just want to be able to mute people. I've developed that habit, okay? How do you interrupt a habit? I will tell you how to interrupt a habit, because I will promise you we will deal with that, absolutely. So thank you. Give it to a team to solve. But what if it's a personal habit? Are you saying the team are going to spend their time going, stop it? Stop it, and give it to my team to sort me out? Because I used to do this thing where I would tell my husband or my kids that I want to change a habit and say, help me out. But then if ever they said, you're doing it again, or you weren't going to be doing that anymore, I get really ratty with them and it'd start a row. So good in theory, not so good emotionally. Work back from the intent and create a process to get to it. That's good, okay? Learning is my favorite way. Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant to learn stuff, provided you don't get frustrated and don't manage it, which is great. Do it 6 times and it becomes a habit. Well, it's interesting because the psychology at the moment says that it takes a little bit longer, but it does depend on the habit. Some habits only 6 times, so that's an interesting one, Tim. I'd love to know, is it for you that it's 6 times? Is it just you've learned that's what your body does? That would be great. 6 times would be brilliant. I'd love that. Okay. Thank you for that. That's really useful. So there's a lot of value in everything you've just talked about. Setting goals, visualizing the goal, taking steps towards it. Those can all be very, very useful. Small steps or big steps, depending on how your brain works, okay? Those are really, really good. And if you liken that to resilience, if you say, right, I know that I have a particular anxiety about, okay, then you can start going, okay, how do I need to change that? I want to talk about how we create habits. But before we do, I want to get a baseline of something that I think is really important before we even get into that. And this is a little bit of a psychology rather than a neuropsychology, okay? And the neuropsychology goes like this. Oh, bit of a quote from Aristotle. I often forget I've got these coming up. Okay. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. If we want to be excellent at being strong, excellent at something, it is an act. It's a habit. It's an act and a habit. Okay. He says it's not an act, but a habit. They're the same kind of thing, really. I'd argue with Aristotle, but he's not around. He's chickened out. Okay. 3 types of habits. Okay. We've got physical habits, we've got thought habits, and we've got emotional habits. Okay. Physical habits, thought habits, and emotional habits. So everything we're going to talk about applies to all 3 of those. So although you might think resilience is about emotion, it can actually be about the thought process as well. So if you remember the first time you started a new job, or the job you're in at the moment, and you learn how to process a piece of information, and the person who was teaching you said, right, when this comes in, you have to look at it for this, and then you have to assess this, and then you will do this with those and this with those. Now you've developed those habits nice and easy, and that's a thought processing habit. And if ever you have to teach it to someone else, you have to take a step right back until you can teach that thought process habit. Okay. Obviously, we know we've got physical habits, you know, we're scratching our head or our nose. I love that little piece of video at the beginning of all of this where I can't remember which prime minister it was busy saying to everybody, she had a piece of paper, she said, right, so nobody should touch their face during the lockdown. That's what spreads it. And then she went, I thought it was hilarious, but of course that's a habit, isn't it? She didn't even know she was doing it until later on it was posted on the internet and everybody reminded her. There's something I want us to start with just before we get into that, and that's this question. How do you measure yourself? How do you measure yourself? You see, how we measure ourselves, how we identify with things makes a difference. So for instance, if you consider yourself to be good at your job and one of your measures is that you arrive early at the office and you work quite long hours and you get your to-do list done first thing in the morning and you have a particular routine, but that's been interrupted, then you may be feeling bad now because you're kind of going, I don't feel like I'm working hard enough. Debbie and I, before we all started saying, well, you know, do you feel guilty about certain things? Debbie feels guilty because she's on furlough and in the garden. And she said that in front of Miranda. So you know, she can't feel that guilty. Otherwise, she'd have said, oh, no, I've been working. Oh, you're not allowed to when you're on furlough, you see. Government might be listening. Very, very difficult. See, so how do you measure yourself? So let me give you a little bit of an example. And forgive me, the examples tend to come from my experience. And the only reason for that is not because it's about me. It's because when people give me their examples, I consider them to be private, other than what Debbie said earlier, which apparently I didn't care about. But thanks, Deb. Thanks for that. But when people give me examples, I try not to use them too often because they're private, unless they give me permission to share. So when all this kicked off, and I don't know at what point for you considered it kicked off. Was it when you first heard some news from China? Or was it later on when people started wandering around your local supermarket in a mask and a hazmat suit, you know? But when this, in my head, sort of kicked off, I was in Africa at a conference, because that's what I do. I travel around doing conferences. When I went to Africa, my diary was full. I was going to be there for 2 weeks. My diary was absolutely chocker, I'd like to say. I was doing some award ceremonies. I'd had some glittery outfits done, which have now not seen the light of day. I've had to wear them for breakfast, just a glittery outfit at breakfast. Marvelous idea, okay? Award ceremonies, first thing that went. Conferences, all my speeches at conferences went. And of course, finally, training courses. Because of course, pretty much they were mostly face-to-face. And although I kept saying to people, we can do remote training, I don't have to get on a plane, very few people were doing it. Interesting how people have changed. I've done quite a few now where people have said, well, we can't wait too long. But anyway, I digress. So there I was in Africa looking at my diary and it was emptying. It was a little bit like when you're watching a screen like this with all these people in and you put them in. If you've ever been on one, you put them into breakout groups and people just go, boo, 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 like somebody's burst all the bubbles, okay? Everybody disappears. That was my diary, okay? And I could do nothing about it. So I arrived back in this country and I looked at a completely empty diary. And I started to panic. But the weird thing was, I wasn't panicking about the finances because for some reason in my head, I thought, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. Nice belief to have. But because I felt guilty. You see, whenever my diary is empty, it's because I haven't been doing my job right. I haven't been contacting people. I haven't been speaking to people. I haven't been getting out there. And every time in my 20 odd years of doing this job, whenever I look at my diary and go, I've not got enough business, all I've had to do is start picking up the phone or typing in an email and chatting to people, and all of a sudden it fills up. That doesn't work in this situation. It just doesn't. So I started feeling guilty. So I was measuring myself on how full my diary was. I also started believing, am I any good at my job? And I could sense that self-esteem starting to, get knocked. So how you measure yourself is really, really important. Do you measure yourself on stuff you can control? Or do you measure yourself on stuff that's controlled by other people? Now, normally, of course, my diary being full is something I control. But in this situation, I can't control that. You know, I can't control a pandemic. Oh, I'd love to have that control, but no. So how you measure yourself is important. Another little story, just a real quick one. So I see we have lots of people who have chosen not to have their video on, and I understand that. It might be because we're recording. It might be because you got your pajamas on and your curlers and you're just wanting to chill and relax. That's cool, okay? But sometimes, and especially at the beginning of all of this, when lots of people hadn't done much Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever it was, loads of people said, oh, I don't like Zoom. I don't like seeing myself on camera. Yeah. Most of us have got used to that, which is great. But there's still a lot of people who go, I don't like seeing myself on camera. And if I knew them well enough, my response would be, why not? That's what you look like. Is that me being rude? Sorry. But you know, my mum's always saying it to me. Oh, I don't like photos of me. I say, Mum, the camera doesn't lie. That's what you look. I look fat on camera. I tend to stop talking at that point. Even I know that's not a line to cross. Okay. But if you measure yourself on this imaginary idea of always looking perfect, and you wouldn't go on camera without your makeup on and all of that kind of stuff, then the question is, we're back to, is that how you measure yourself? Because if that happens and you used to be flawless and you didn't have any wrinkles, then as you get a little bit older, the measurement becomes uncontrollable. Okay, so really quick story. I was at a conference. I did a speech just before lunch one day, and I came off stage, and it's nice to do your speech just before lunch, because while you're going around the lunch hall, everyone can still remember that you just spoke. If you were at the beginning, people are, it's not that they've forgotten me, but so I'm walking around the conference hall, and there's loads of people stopping me and giving their opinions. And luckily everyone's being really nice and really kind, and I'm feeling pretty good. In fact, I did several laps. I didn't want any lunch. I just did several laps so they could speak to me. Hello, hello. Anyway, this guy came up to me and said, oh, Heather, I'm really sorry I missed your talk. I had to take a call, but I hear it went well, and I hear they're comparing you to two people. Now, some of you who know me will know that there's one particular person I am constantly being compared to. Debbie is laughing. I'm just looking around to see who knows. Yeah, Miranda's nodding. Yeah. And this was the first one. They said, yeah, they're comparing you to Victoria Wood. Now, if you met me in person, yes, Debbie's laughing. Okay. And I don't mind that. She was one of my heroes, So therefore, someone compares me to Victoria Wood. Oh, yeah, that's a goodie, I used to say, if she doesn't stop copying me, I'll sue, but I can't do that anymore. But then this person added two people, Victoria Wood and, wait for it, Barry Manilow. Yes. Excuse me, ladies on the line, tell me, how many of you would be flattered if you were compared not just to a bloke, but to a bloke who's, what, is he 70? Is he 80? I don't know how old he is. I mean, he's got a good few years on me, and he wasn't that good looking before, but certainly the plastic surgery hasn't helped. I'm not being rude, but and I was a bit shocked. And the guy who said it immediately started to back out the room and go, anyway, I've just got to, oh, Bob, is that you? I've just got to go over there. And disappeared, having insulted me. Thanks very much. So I left the room for a moment. I scratched my head and thought, well, that's a little bit offensive. And I sat in a corner and I kind of nursed my wounds for a moment. And then I thought, Heather, you don't measure yourself on your looks. It's blindingly obvious you don't measure yourself on your looks, because half the time you pull funny faces. Half the time you don't bother with I've made Debbie cry now, but with laughter, I'm hoping. It's made your mascara run, Debbie. Oh no. But if you don't measure yourself on the looks, then don't bother. Be happy that you get compared to, and it wasn't that I was playing the piano. The whole point is, if you measure yourself on something you can't control, then you can't keep that stress away. Does that make sense? Or that low self-esteem. So during this lockdown, it's a good idea to analyze those feelings and go, do I measure myself on something to do with the office instead of actually my quality of work? Do I measure myself on the amount of hours I put in rather than the output I get? I'm pretty certain that most bosses, and I might be wrong here, you can tell me if I'm wrong, most bosses, if you could get the output they would like with half the hours, I know that's pretty impossible, or with less hours and had some time in the garden, they wouldn't mind. Does that make sense? But there's a lot of people who measure themselves almost like they're clocking in with a card. The danger, of course, of that is they clock in with a card and don't do their work and clock out and go, well, I turned up for 5 hours. So how do you measure yourself is an important start to this, okay? So spend a little bit of time on that one, which I think is a particularly useful one, okay? How do you measure yourself? That's scary. Marcus Aurelius said, if something ails or bothers you, it's not the thing itself, but the importance you attach to it and that you have the power to change at any time, okay? I want to go into some science now about the neuroscience, okay? But before I do, we have a second poll with some questions. And I don't know if Simon wants to launch this or if I launch it. I could do it, but it'd be nice if you do, Simon. I'd be happy with that.
I'll do it, yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. It's nice to have an assistant. I usually do this all on my own. My lovely assistant, Simon, thank you. He's launched a poll about energy, how much energy we use. Debbie's lolling. Barry was a sex symbol in his day. I'm just having a look around for Barry. Oh, he must be behind my chat box there, my poll box. Just having a quick look for Barry. Probably not got his camera on now.
I think she means Barry Manilow.
Oh, yes. Well, I suppose he was a little bit, but I think it was more his voice than his looks. If we're really honest, Also power and fame. Always measure myself on how I think other people view me. It's been yes, that is a really good point, Neil. It's always been a route to madness and anxiety because people can take exception to something you say without analyzing your intent. I don't know if any of you have ever said anything that was supposed to be a bit of a joke and just it tripped out of your mouth. And before you knew it, somebody's gone off in a huff and you go, whoa, oh. You just can't always rely on other people not taking umbrage of certain things, no matter how hard you try. So yeah, measuring yourself on how other people view you is dangerous. We have to measure ourselves with our internal compass, our own personal intent. Okay, so how are we doing? We've only got a few more people to answer the poll. The first, of course, there's 3 questions this time, so a little bit more difficult. We're moving up in the world from 1 question to 3 questions. We can handle it. So the first question is about energy on an exercise bike. Second one about running a marathon. I'm not expecting you to know the answers. We just guess at these. The third question is really the one I was getting at. So we'll give you a few more seconds to read those and we'll see how that goes. I wonder what you've, by the way, just as an aside, if you've answered the question, I wonder what you've learned about yourself in lockdown. I learned that I'm really bad at making pom-poms. I learned to crochet and I had to get a pom-pom machine to make pom-poms. And I remember Blue Peter when they told us to do it with cardboard. For those of you who remember Blue Peter and making pom-poms with cardboard, I tried it 5 times and I was pants at it. And that's me being polite in the descriptive word. So I got a machine so I can make some pom-poms for my rainbow of support, which I crocheted. Now I know how to crochet. I don't know what to do with it. I'm actually doing a hat now, a rainbow hat. It's a bit weird. Right. Yeah, I struggle with the car. Pom-pom makers are fab, aren't they? They're so easy and so cheap. I learned there's a reason I pay a fortune for the kids' childcare. Yeah, I realized early on that I am not a teacher. I am not. That's why teachers do teaching. We may sometimes call them names or what have you, but I'm telling you, it's a tough job with kids, even if you've only got 2 kids in the house. Imagine having 30 in the classroom. Okay, let's close down that poll, shall we? We close that poll and share it. Okay, let's share those results. So what have we said? We're saying that most people think it's about 300 calories an hour on an exercise bike. Well, of course, it depends on the pace you put it at or whether you stand up in the seat. Average, it's actually just around the 200 mark. So for those of you who are getting 300 calories, you're working much harder than most of us. Okay, well done for you lot. Okay, and then if we ask the question about a marathon runner, it's And I can be quite accurate on the research with this because I went for 15 stone, about 3-hour marathon. It's actually 3,573 calories, but presumably as soon as they cross the line, they just drop down dead. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, that's apparently it. So if that's the case, and that was a definite lead in, as you've probably figured out, to the third question, which is what I'm getting at. According to research, approximately how many calories does a chess grandmaster use during a tournament? Okay. Most people have gone between 2,000 and 3,000. Very few people, in fact, none of you have gone for over 5,000. So we kind of think it's in the middle. And I'll bet you some of you, when you looked at the 2,000, thought, where's the lower mark? Where are the lower ones? Okay. Let's get back to the stuff on the brain. And I'll explain why I was asking that. But I bet you some of you were already well ahead of me into why I was asking that question, okay? And it's because the brain uses more energy than any other organ in the body, okay? A chess grandmaster, according to research, uses over 4,000, sometimes over 5,000 calories in a match. One chess grandmaster lost 21 pounds in one tournament match. Now, admittedly, they don't tend to eat a lot, but the games they don't go on forever. But the reason is because the brain, when it's thinking new thoughts and analyzing a game constantly, it's using a massive amount of energy, which is why the brain creates habits. It creates habits because habits use less energy. So babies use a massive amount of energy. That's why they sleep a lot. Teenagers, young children, again, need to sleep a lot. Teenagers, I don't know whether they've just got into the habit of, if I'm really honest, I just need to sleep, okay? But when you're just using old habits, it uses less energy. So what the brain does, it tries to create habits. So that picture you can see there with the blobby green neuron in the middle connects with the other neurons, okay, using electricity, kind of something like this, okay? One neuron talks to another neuron. It sends electricity along a little connection and it lays down physical stuff. We're going to call it stuff because we're not trained to be brain surgeons here. We don't need the technical term, okay? And it's hard to pronounce and I can't spell it, okay? But when it goes that way again, it lays down more stuff. And when it goes that way again, it lays down even more stuff. We call these things dendrites. The thicker the dendrite, the faster the electricity goes down it, and therefore the faster the result at the end of it, okay? So what we want to do is we want to create pathways in the brain. The brain is constantly creating habits. It's not assessing if they're good for us or bad for us. It's just constantly creating habits so that it makes it easier and it can use less energy, even if those habits aren't good for us, okay? So if you imagine that's a blind picture of a set of dendrites. Now here's an important point here, and that's that electricity is subject to the law of physics and it must travel down the path of least resistance, okay? It must travel down the path of least resistance. So when in the brain the electricity gets to a junction, it'll go down the habit, the one that's thicker, that you've gone down more often, unless you choose and consciously choose to change it. So all physical reactions are created in the brain. The brain controls them. What do they start with? A thought. Every physical response you have starts with the thought. So it's the thought that creates the connections. Then there's a release of chemicals and we get a physical reaction. Emotionally, the brain creates our emotions. So what do all of our emotions start with? Yeah, a thought, okay? It starts with a thought. I'm just coming out of that so I can just check. Oh, Paul's having to leave us. Hopefully you'll get the video and see the rest later. Jill's saying, Catherine, you and I would be good together as I'm digging up and you're building. Growing new vegetables. Gotcha. Do you know have you ever done that on WhatsApp where you come in at the end of a conversation and you go, what was that about? Because last time the conversation was about that. Very weird. It's a little bit like running one of these sessions. Okay, so what we're talking about is creating the connections in the brain and then the chemicals being released to cause a physical response or an emotional response. But even our emotional responses are habits. So the good news is it means that we can realign them, change them. There's over 300 chemicals that the body can produce because of thought, okay? Adrenaline, serotonin, cortisol, and loads more that I'm not even going to try to do it. So the whole point here is if you're feeling angry, it's because you're thinking angry. Now, it might be natural for you to think angry, and it might be caused by something that's understandable. You're feeling angry. But the truth of the matter is, the reason you're feeling that way is because you're thinking that way. If you change the way you think, you change the way you feel, okay? These chemicals are released as soon as we trigger them, okay? So if you want to feel happy, all right, don't think of a smiling camel necessarily, but hey, whatever. Does that make sense? Yeah? Just quickly coming out of this so I can see, am I making sense? Are you still with me? Yes, no, shut up, Heather. It's time for a drink. Pass me the rosé. Big thumb up from Sue. Thank you very much. And Christine, thank you very much. Oh, brilliant. Glad you're all with us. Fantastic. So now let's talk about how this works then, so that we work on a process for changing, okay? Because that's the bit. And this works for all of our resilience stuff, but actually for everything else too, okay? We want to change a habit. And it goes like this, okay? We end up with a loop, a habit loop. Now, this research came from marketing and then was put into neurophysiology, okay? It was decided that the reason we buy things is because we're cued, because we're triggered, but actually it's just because of habit. So people who want to sell us something want to create a habit. If you have a product like a Kit Kat, you want to attach it to something that's already part of a routine. So they want to trigger that, okay? So what we have here is this three-step habit loop: cue, routine, reward. So with that, we have to go through it. So step one of changing a habit for our habit process. Step one, become aware of the habit, whether it's an emotional one or a physical one, the one you want to change, and decide what your preferred habit would be, okay? That's not complicated, excuse me, other than the fact that we do need to be self-aware enough. Some people get defensive about stuff or angry about stuff without even realizing that it's a habit. Yeah, they just instantly go, well, you made me do that. You made me do that, okay? The other day, this is going to sound a bit twee. This is a new one. I've never shared this before. I was doing a quiz for my next door neighbors. We had about 10 of the neighbors online, and I invited my mum and dad, who don't live near here, but my mum and dad were on the quiz, and the neighbors were very kind. But during that, when I said, does anyone want me to repeat that question? My dad would unmute himself, and he would call me by my family nickname, okay? And none of the neighbors knew what that was. And so I'm going to be honest with you, okay? My nickname, I've never shared, so I've never shared this before. I'm regretting already. My nickname with the family is Boo, okay? I just know you're laughing. I know you're laughing inside. So my nickname is Boo. I've always been called Boo. But what would happen is my dad, being about 80 odd, would come a bit too close to the camera and he'd go, Boo, Boo, can you repeat question 5? And of course, all my neighbors are going, why does he keep saying Boo? Does he think he's going to frighten us? But what was really nice was it didn't embarrass me. It made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. In lockdown, when I haven't seen my parents for a while, it made me feel warm and fuzzy. So sometimes it's the first time I've ever realized that. I actually quite like it. I wonder if you've got a nickname, a family nickname that you might share with us. I've shared. Time for you to share. Anyway, so we have to become aware of it, whether it's an emotional one or not, okay? Step 2, experiment with the rewards. Figure out why you do the habit. What was the reward originally? Look at your beliefs and your emotions, but know this. Our reward is either moving towards pleasure or away from pain. So for instance, you pay the mortgage to move away from pain. The pain of, I've got a tickle. Not a good time to get a tickle. The pain of losing your house or what have you, okay? So here's another little story, okay? Last year, really quick one. Last year, my son was diagnosed with cancer. It's all okay. He's in remission now, so it's not a sad story. It's all right. But while he was going through all the chemo and everything else, I tended to feel a little more tired. I'm sure many of you will have experienced this. I felt a bit more tired than normal because we were battling against that thought process of, is it going to be all right? With me going on stage and saying to people, you got to think positive and all of that kind of stuff, okay? And so when I got home, I was always a little bit tireder than usual. And so I'd have a little bit of a drink, just the one bottle, which I'd share with my husband because he would insist on me doing that, which I just think is selfish on his part. But anyway, after about 3 months, my husband said to me, darling, I think we're drinking a bit much. I think what he was actually saying was, I think you're drinking a bit much and you're forcing me to join in with you to prevent you drinking the whole bottle. I think that's probably what he was trying to get at, but you know, I don't know. And I started thinking about that and thought, wow, if I turned into an alcoholic, why am I, why do I feel like I want to drink when I get home? And I realized when I looked at the reward, it's because I wanted a treat. I don't know what you consider to be a treat, but normally I only drink at the weekends, and therefore it's a Friday night feeling. So for those of you who aren't teetotal, are you an end of the week drinker, Friday nighter? Yeah, Friday nighter, yeah. So of course we associate it with Friday nights. So it becomes a reward, or we associate it with a special day. Maybe there's a particular wine that is, smelly. I still call my 29-year-old daughter smelly. Sorry, that was a bit distracting, that one. I just saw the word smelly. Okay. So do we see it as a treat, a reward? A bit like a lie-in on a Saturday. Do you still see that as a reward or a treat? Because when you had small children, you weren't able to do it. Same kind of thing, really. So all I did was I changed the reward, because the habit was also established with that. So I changed it. What did I change it to? I changed it to, now, has anyone here ever had a mint magnum? Mint magnum? Yep. Nectar of the gods. Oh, I don't normally eat chocolate, but what wonderful. Now, if you've never had one, my suggestion is don't get sucked in. Don't get sucked in. Because I am of an age right now where I can't afford that calorific intake without actually then spending 2 hours on an exercise bike or going for a very long walk, probably against government guidelines, okay? Or a very fast walk. But all I had to do was when I got home, I checked out with those rewards. Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes sense? So look at the reward. See if you can play differently with the reward. For me, it just so happened that reward and the routine were kind of the same thing. So I was able to change it, okay? The next thing we do is we isolate the cue. Find out what the trigger point is, the trigger that sets us down that road. So what is it that triggers the bad habit that says, woe is me, what if? So here's a thought. One of our resilience issues is that we spend too much time. Double caramel, really, Miranda? I bet there are more calories than the mint one. Okay. But it's a treat, right? It's a treat. But the whole point in this cue thing is, what's the cue that sets us off? One of our issues can be the what ifs. When it comes to resilience, we spend a lot of time worrying about stuff that we can't control and worrying about stuff that actually may never even happen. Now, it's different if you're an actuary. Actuaries have to plan for all disasters. But how many, if you added up the time you'd spent in your life worrying about things that actually never happened, I wonder how much time you would have back. What if can be a habit. And when you say to someone, I'm planning, don't be fooled. There's a difference between planning and worrying. Yes? So look at the cue that triggers it. So I call this the sliding doors moment. If anyone's ever seen the film Sliding Doors, yeah, those of you who remember Sliding Doors. If you haven't seen it, by the way, it still stands up if you're looking for something to watch on lockdown. There's a moment right at the beginning, and I'm not spoiling it for you because this is right at the beginning. Gwyneth Paltrow has lost her job, and she is leaving the office, and she goes into the tube station, and she goes to catch a tube. At that moment, the film splits into two timelines, one where she manages to catch the tube and one where she doesn't. I think a little child gets in her way and she steps back. And because of this, the history, her next history, if you like, goes down two timelines. So I call that the sliding doors moment. One is when you do the habit that you normally do, and the other is the new habit. Find the moment of sliding doors. Is it when an email arrives? Is it when somebody says something to you? For those of you who are currently avoiding social media, it's when social media starts going, oh no, millions of people have died, or oh no, we're going to be in lockdown until we're 95, said somebody who was 94 and a half. I don't know. So find the sliding doors moment. So this works with regard to resilience, but it actually works exactly the same with your teams in the workplace. If you want them to change a behavior, you have to find the sliding doors moment. Is it when a particular piece of paper lands on their desk and they choose not to collaborate with people, but to do it themselves because their time is too precious, or they've got too much on, or what have you? What's the sliding doors moment? So what we do is we isolate the cue, because that's the thing we're looking for when we want to have the new behavior. I tend to spend a fair bit of time looking at this and saying, all right, then, What's my cue? What's my routine? And what's my reward? And I write them down. You might not be someone who writes things down. I find it gives me clarity in my head. Next, when we're looking at the cue, we're looking at 5 different types of cue. Okay. Is it a location? Whenever you get in your car, you feel like a sugary drink. Whenever you come home, you sit on a particular settee. I don't know. Is it time? Is it, I have to have my coffee at 9 o'clock in the morning or I'm useless? Is it that? Is it an emotional state? When I'm feeling guilty, when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling whatever? Is it another person? Does that person make you feel that way? Or is it an immediately preceding action? Sometimes when we've done one thing, it instantly takes us into another. And then after that, we generate the plan. What's the plan going to be? When that cue happens, we're going to go into that reward. And I think it was Tim who said he does it 6 times. Well, it may take more than 6 times, but certainly over a little while. Current psychological research says, please don't be shocked, somewhere between 60 and 66 days. However, think about the dendrites. If you do it twice as often in a shorter period of time, then you'll build it twice as fast. And then we have to drill the skill, just as if we were a sports person learning a new skill, okay? Drill that skill. Check what beliefs are driving the reward. How much do you want to change? You know, do you really want to? And then have a look back at that routine. Do I understand the habit loop? You know? And if you want to change something, tell yourself, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Do you need to stop, start, do something better to be more resilient? Let's go back to Aristotle. Excellence is an act won by training or habituation. Well, maybe we should say resilience is won by training and habituation. A spreadsheet. Love a good spreadsheet to sort out your habits. Absolutely. So I have a little question for you. Okay, we've only got we've got 4 minutes left and I've kind of come to the end, but questions, you can ask any questions either online now or feel free to contact me or Simon. You've got my address. I'm happy to answer any questions if you didn't want to ask them during this because everybody's watching or reading, okay? But the question is, what habit loops can you develop? Now you understand what the brain is doing, you know? Has anybody got any particular questions about what I've said, either about the cue, the routine, the reward? Please feel free to pop something in there. Someone saying thank you. And the chamber, of course, thank you to the chamber for doing all of this. Sorry you have to go, but you know, pretty much that's not so bad time-wise. If you haven't got any questions, I'm not seeing any down there right now. It all depends on how fast you can type, doesn't it? If you're one-fingered typer, it's going to take you a while. You can always mute yourself and ask. We don't mind that. Often I find at this point, sometimes there's a little bit of silence while people are thinking, but that's okay. I will just say though, I'm really happy to help out. I decided at the beginning of this lockdown that I was going to offer these for free. Okay. I was going to not try and sell stuff. I was going to offer them for free because people had their heads everywhere else. And so I've been really busy running these sessions, which is great. But that means that during this lockdown, if you want any help from me, if you want any response, if you want to talk something over or send me an email, do you know what? Please don't feel bad about it. I'd really like to help. Okay. In return, I ask one little thing. Okay. In return, I ask one little thing, and it's this. Go onto LinkedIn. If you've enjoyed it, make a comment. Find the Chamber of Commerce's thread on LinkedIn or mine or both, if you're feeling generous, or both, and make a comment about it. If you haven't liked it, it was free. Get over it. My name's Bob Smith. Say something about him. Sorry, I do hope your name's not Bob Smith. That was just a name, okay? But get onto LinkedIn and share it or share some stuff. But I'm going to hand kind of back to Simon. I haven't said I was going to. I'm just saying, I would like to hear more about what we do when we can't control factors stressing us. Yeah, this is about controlling the controllables. So I'll just give you 1 minute on that because that's an important point, Lizzie, okay? By the way, Lizzie, you talked about interrupting the habit. Did you understand when we were talking about those 3 different areas that you interrupted at some point there? Yeah. So that the things that aren't stressing, the things that might be stressing is about factors we can't control is this. And this may seem glib, but it's not. Concentrate on factors that you can control. Break it into small sections. Okay. So for instance, an illness might be something you can't control, but you can work on small things every day. You can work on maybe a little bit more sleep, or getting a project where you're working on a mental way of doing things or a physical way of doing things. There's also another thing, which is a certain amount of acceptance. A certain amount of acceptance. There will always be things in life that we can't control. And if we just focus on those, we end up feeling like a victim. Don't be a victim. Take hold of the stuff you can control and do stuff with that. And try not to focus. I realize that might sound glib, but it's really powerful. I've had quite a few things in my life that have been uncontrollable. Both of my boys have been just randomly ill for no apparent reason, nothing they could do anything about. And each time we focused on the stuff we could control. And thank goodness they got over it. It may not have been the case, but they got over it. But the question is, during it, was getting stressed about it going to make it any different? So once you've built the thought process, yeah, it becomes easier. The emotions become easier. Acceptance is important, and control the controllables. I hope that doesn't sound too glib. It is. Noticing different cues, habits, and then change. Absolutely. Absolutely. So our time is up. Simon, do you want to finish off?
Heather, I think you've pretty much finished it. I've got one question for you, which I feel like I want you to. Will you sign this for me?
I will.
It's been in my collection for many years. So
it
looks nothing like you, though. It looks nothing like you.
You haven't heard that story before, so you can't have been prepared for it. Which means the sad thing is, you really did have that.
I've done. A lot of people are doing the top 10 albums thing at the minute, aren't they, on social media? That's in my top 10. I blame my dad. It's the music of my youth, is that, I'm afraid. So.
Brilliant.
Heather, you've been absolutely great. Thank you so much.
My
can
pleasure.
I just go the video wall for a virtual round of applause for our speaker, Heather? I'll circulate Heather's contact details in the post-event email, and as she said, please do get in touch with her, because she's quite happy to hear from us all. Stay safe, everybody. Don't forget to check chamberlive.co.uk for the next events. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.